Welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast. My name is Phil Crimmins. This is podcast number 159, and we're going to talk about the questions and comments that came in today. We have some updates about the advanced course I want to get to, but just if you're new here and you haven't seen the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast before, what it is, it's a Q&A podcast that is directly interlinked in many different ways to the Mandarin Blueprint Method video curriculum. Now, we had this guy, William Edmedes, suggest that we make like an intro for the podcast that explains all this stuff. But I like taking the time each week to explain a little bit about what it's about, just give you a teaser as to what the Mandarin Blueprint Method course is about, because in the process of doing so, I tend to get a new angle on what makes it so good. Because when you're developing something like the Mandarin Blueprint Method over many years, we've been working on it for almost 6 years now, and the things that you pick up as time goes on, you find different ways to look at the same project, because you're close in on the project when you're looking at like, how do I choose what usage to use for this HSK 8 word? And then you see the larger pictures, which is like, how are people responding to phase 3 of the course? Or, what is the point where you can read native Chinese content, and how do we get you there? And what's the quickest way you could get there? These types of things are constantly running through our minds and sort of running through what we already know as the systems of the Mandarin Blueprint Method. And as a result, I find I discover new things about the method each week just in talking about it. So, we might make some kind of intro at some point. It is 159 podcasts, and we still just start it by saying, welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast. But on the other hand, I think it kind of makes it more casual, more personal in that way. So, we'll see. We'll see what we do there. But let's talk a little bit about what the heck the course is, because, we have built up the course and the podcast to work in tandem as an interlinked unit that gives us a mechanism for answering feedback that comes in through the course. So we have lessons on the course, simple lessons that tell you one thing to do at a time, and you just build and build and build until you have a vast knowledge of the Mandarin Chinese language. However, along the way, you're naturally going to have points of confusion, or a question about maybe a grammar point, a question about how the Henze movie method works, a question about the course structure and all of that. And so what's good about the podcast is it's the way each week that we go through and answer those questions, and then we leave the answer to the question throughout the course, which means that, a question that you might have had is in many cases very likely already answered, and it's placed in the course at the exact moment when you're likely to have that question. And it means that the course itself is no longer just the product of Luke Neale and Phil Crimmins. It's also the product of all of your brains combined asking questions, and then us just sort of like managing the puzzle pieces and putting it together in such a way that is clear, concise, and also it kind of naturally builds in an empathy for what it's like to go through Mandarin Chinese, because as much as we might understand having done it ourselves, we still made the course after already being fluent and literate. So there's always points where we might have forgotten a little bit. What was it like to be in your second month of learning Chinese and all of that? Well, somebody's going to ask a question who's in their second month of learning Chinese and going, I'm confused about this point. And we go, oh, yeah, we should have mentioned that. So let me answer this question in the podcast, put that podcast clip video in the course itself, and then bam, you've got this great answer to a question that sort of empathizes with where you are now, because somebody else was just there and just asked that question. And so it's great. It's really this fantastic mechanism that we've gotten together here. We're so grateful to all of you each week for sending us so many questions. I don't say this enough. Each week we have a huge list of questions, to the point where many of them we have to just say, okay, well, we've answered this one in text, in a text reply, so we're going to leave it out of the podcast, because if we answered literally all of them, the podcast would be 4 hours or something, right? So we are so grateful to all of you for leaving such fantastic messages each week. You're awesome. Keep it up. Zhenbang. All right, so let's move on to some course updates. As many of you know, I've been working on the advanced course for many months now. It feels like it's all my brain has been swimming in for the past several months, but it's been great and satisfying because we're doing really well. So what's going on with it? Well, the as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, the characters are planned out through 3050, which is just great. When you get to 3050 characters, you're going to know how to understand pretty much anything that you read, at least from the character level. So they're planned out, but we need to have our assistant. We actually have 2 assistants helping us create the Kajabi course, make thumbnails for them, put the content into the course in the same order, and then we have recording artists currently recording the individual character files. So you'll have just a file of the male and female saying the character in its primary pinyin. And then we're going to, put those recordings into flashcards, and then we'll be ready to go. Now, that's still a fair few things to do, and they're in process, but we're making good progress. We have 88 levels total, going up to characters 3050, and I like that there's 88. Ba shi ba. That's a very lucky Chinese number. And so we've got the levels going up to 88, and at the moment, our assistants have finished through level 73 of the make a movie content and the pick a prop content. Now there's a lot, so each level takes a bit of time, but that's great. And it means that, in the foreseeable future, we'll be able to have a sort of a soft release of the advanced course and upper intermediate course for the characters and the props. And the thing is, that we're not going to have the vocab and context or vocab boost lessons in right away at released, but that's okay because as we've kind of talked about ad nauseum over the past few weeks, once you get to a certain level of intermediate, you've got enough grammar under your belt that the key to your success in Chinese starts becoming get your characters down, get the rest of the characters down. You might know 1,500 characters and know loads of grammar points and have a good grammar feeling because you've read so much of many of the Chinese sentences and you've read the graded readers and all of that. But at some point, it becomes more beneficial to just get to that point of knowing 3,000 characters, knowing 99.4% of the language by frequency, because then you can pick up almost any piece of native Chinese content. And at least on the character level, you know what the character is, you know how it's pronounced generally, and you can understand based on that alone, based on that combined with your grammar understanding. And so when that happens, you're going to be able to acquire a lot of words without the aid of either living links or English, because the contextual Chinese will teach you the words. And then occasionally you'll run into a word that you'll be like, I'm still not sure what that is, even though I know the characters. But then you can take that word, put it into Command F in one of the review links on Mandarin Blueprint and see if we have a lesson for it. And if we do, then you can get a more surgical way to practice that word. So how are we going to introduce the vocab and context and vocab boost lessons in the upper intermediate and advanced course? Well, we're going to go level by level, and there's sort of a process that I've built out so that we make sure that the content you're getting that's in context is high quality. So the first thing is, we have the word lists, but we need to make sure that we cover every usage of each word. So if a word has a verb, adjective, and adverb usage, well, then we better make sure that we have all 3 of those listed, because, just how you use an adjective is going to be very different from how you use a verb. So, and sometimes all you need to know is this word can be used as a verb and a noun, and then you're like, okay, I know how words that can be used as a verb and a noun, I know what they're like because I've already seen it happen loads of times in my Mandarin Blueprint flashcards. But just knowing that alone is enough. That can be the case sometimes. But anyway, we have the usages, and then I'll check the usages and I'll make sure that we have the right amount of usages for each word. This is actually quite a laborious process, but it's worth it because it means that we're giving you good surgical practice for all of this. After I've set the usages, then we have our writer write out a sentence for each usage. Then I check the sentences for top-down words so that there's never more than one top-down word. And I want it to be like, only maybe 20 to 30% of the sentences even have a top-down word. The large majority of them should not have them, right? And so I check them for those. Usually there's a few that she needs to update because there was 2 or more top-down words. She'll then update them. Then I'll confirm them there, and then we'll send them to a Chinese professor who checks them for just that they sound natural. From a Chinese native, very educated native perspective, does this sentence sound good to a Chinese person? I can judge whether or not there are top-down words because that's somewhat, it is objective, but when you're talking about whether or not the sentence really sounds natural in the flow of conversation, even somebody as fluent as I am can't hold a candle to like a professor. of Chinese. So that's what that they'll check them, and then if there are any sentences they think need to be updated, they'll send them back to the writer. The writer will update them at that point, at which point they'll be confirmed. Once they're confirmed, then our assistant will send the sentences to the recording artists. And then while they are recording the sentences, which will take, usually a week or two, then he'll put the content on the website and get the add the top down words and make sure they're covered as well. And then get the content over to the flashcard maker, who, when the flashcards are ready, when the recordings are ready for the flashcards, will make that level's flashcards. So essentially, the vocab and context and vocab boost lessons are going to be released level by level, and it's probably going to take several more months until that process is finished. But like I said, the more important process is that you finish getting your characters. And let's suppose you're somebody who's waiting on tenterhooks for the upper intermediate and the advanced course to release. It's still going to take you a while to get through 1,500 characters by themselves, although some of you are really fast. But still, though, it's still going to take you, some time. And in that intermediary time, we'll be building up the vocab and context and vocab boost lessons. So we'll probably stay out ahead of you the whole time, which is, great news, because it means you'll kind of be learning it the right way anyway. And like I said, once the vocab and context and the vocab boost lessons are there, Mandarin Blueprint, when it comes to the vocabulary element of it, the words, will become kind of like an excellent personalized dictionary that is like better than other dictionaries, because for sure whatever thing you're looking up is going to contain characters and words that or at least the characters if you decide to finish the advanced course just characters only at first. So anyway, this is all just to say that it's a really exciting time. We've got a lot of stuff coming very soon, and just keep an eye out. Keep an eye out. We'll be letting you know as soon as there's something to share with you. All right. With that in mind, let's head into this week's questions and comments. The first is from email. This is from Marian Collins-Steding. And we have, I'm absolutely loving the course. I'm very pleased with the curriculum and my progress. I appreciate all the work that has been done, and the quality shows. Hats off to everyone involved. Yours, Marian Collins-Steding, PhD. Well, that's a very kind compliment there, Marian. And, we're just constantly working on it, constantly trying to make sure that people are enjoying it. And it's really great to get that type of feedback. All right, Evan Hall in the community forum. I've really been enjoying the podcast. I listen to them at work and feel like I'm using time that is not my own for my own progress. It seems like there is a lot of people in New Zealand on the course. I'm an American who luckily got stuck here during COVID. Yay, I'm in Nelson. If any other Kiwis are close, we could meet up for a study session. Well, yeah, any Kiwis in New Zealand who want to meet up with Evan. We love this idea of having a study buddy, which doesn't even mean that you necessarily just study together. It can just mean that you just talk about your experience with Mandarin Blueprint. If you're in the same time zone, you could do it via Zoom or Skype, but you can also just do this by meeting up if you're in the right area. So if you want to set up a meetup, just post in the community forum. You can go to your profile and add a little shaking hands icon to let people know that you're interested in doing meetups. And, that will be great. Speaking of, I've noticed that there's a lot of people from Mandarin Blueprint in Austin, Texas. And as it happens, I'm probably going to be moving there next year. So if any of you want to meet up at some point late next summer, just let me know. And maybe we can have a Austin, Texas meetup for Mandarin Blueprint. Cindy Nkhoma on You Did It, which is the final lesson in pronunciation mastery. She says, I am impressed with the way the pronunciation course was delivered. I am glad I can make a few sentences in Chinese despite being a beginner. I plan to go through the course again. Thank you. Well, that's awesome, Cindy. And, the sentences that we use in pronunciation mastery, I just want to, make this clear. They are all useful, but they're also only chosen because of the pronunciation that they have so that you can practice that pronunciation. We figure it's better to practice syllables of Chinese with actual Chinese than simply repeating some kind of repetitious drill all the time, which is what a lot of teachers do. But to be clear, the way you're going to get really good at Chinese, the way you're going to get really strong in all of your various like word accumulation, fluency, literacy, the way you're going to get strong in that is by learning the characters and learning the words that we cover in the foundation course and then the intermediate course and then beyond. So, the Phase 1 Characters and Components course is where you want to go if you want to start learning lots of vocabulary by building from the bottom up. And so that's the important thing to recognize there, but it is good that you have some great phrases from Pronunciation Mastery to focus on. Just understand that when you're really going to get good is when you start learning characters in the Phase 1 course and then build from there. Grammar question from Kairi Shikari on Vocab Unlocked from Jiang. He says, not sure what the role that the 来讲 plays in 这张照片对奶奶来讲是很重要的. It almost feels like the sentence would have the same meaning without it. So without it, what the structure that Kairi is missing here is the 对 object 来说 or 来讲. Really, 说 and 讲 can so often be interchangeable that you want to look for the pattern. So I feel pretty confident that Kairi probably knows the 对我来说 or 对他来说, 对奶奶来说, which just means in that person's opinion or from that person's perspective, and you can just switch 讲 and 说, right? So you could say 对奶奶来讲, 对奶奶来讲. Right, so that would mean from grandma's perspective. And so the sentence means this picture, this photograph is very important for grandma or from grandma's perspective. A lot of times these things don't translate perfectly if you translate them directly, but it's essentially just saying this photograph is very important to grandma, right? And the 对奶奶来讲 is establishing that who's it important to? Well, 奶奶, right? So that's how that works. Melissa Niesen on bonus, our top 5 most difficult tone pairs. She says, great reminder about tone pairs. I found that if you let the first tone in 知道 drift towards second tone, you risk it being understood as 迟到, which is technically they have a different pinyin initial in ch versus j, but it is still quite close. And if you say 迟到, that means that you're late for something as opposed to 知道, which means that you are, something, right? So quite a different verb there, and they are pretty close. So yeah, getting your tone pairs down will help you be understood. Mirko R on 想 in context. Hi there. At this point, level 13, should we be able to know how the sentences would sound? I'm having huge trouble with this. Thanks to the 汉字 movie method, I can easily remember the tone of each character. However, combining them into a Chinese-sounding sentence is still very hard, even if I just do it in my mind without saying the sentence out loud. No, you should not be able to do this yet in level 13 because level 13 is the beginning of phase 3, which is the first time we introduce anything in context whatsoever. So like everything in the first 12 levels is all about learning individual characters and then learning how characters combine to make words. So, crawl, walk. And then right now we're starting to maybe jog by by making sentences that are made up of the characters and words you already know. But don't kid yourself. This is the very beginning of it. Like this is the first part of putting characters together. It's not going to be easy yet. Like we're just at the point where we're playing around with the idea of like, hey, you could put these characters together and make some sentences. Like wild, right? And people will see them, and there's 2 reactions. One is to, I guess, expect yourself to instantly be able to do this easily. Or just to go, isn't it amazing that I can do anything at all with this, right? That's the attitude would be better to take on, because you're literally looking at Chinese squiggles and it might take a little bit of effort, it might take some time you have to spend on each character, but you can read it and understand it without the aid of pinyin, which means that you're reading Chinese successfully. You're getting comprehensible input, and you're getting it really early. You're getting it after only learning 105 characters, and so it's just a huge advantage that you get there. So that's what I would say about that. It's completely reasonable to not be at the point in level 13 where you can understand how the sentences would sound. I mean, certainly. Okay, so let me build this into Mirko's next comment on 记 in context because it's relevant. So he says, so far, I've found every character we've learned in my memory palace. I did not have to look that one up once. I knew mnemonic techniques were powerful, but this borders on witchcraft. The only thing I keep forgetting is how to spell mnemonic. Sure. Here's the point that I wanted to make in response to Mirko on this lesson, as in connection with Mirko's comment on xiang in context, which is that if you're able to remember each character via the Henzi movie method, and you can remember how it's pronounced and find it in your memory palace, then that means that you can look at a sentence that contains all characters you know, and you can leave out the top-down word. You don't have to do it for this. But just, you could take the time to remember each individual character, pronounce it, and then go, okay, and then the next character, how's that one pronounced? Oh, it's pronounced this way. Okay, put them together if they're one word, or take them and just read them slowly. It's okay to read sentences at the beginning in a way that is somewhat robotic, because the flow of the sentence will come later. You'll practice shadowing. You'll do some things as you get more advanced to help the flow of sentences sound better. But take, for example, this is a sentence that's going to come up later. 虽然只差2岁，但他也比我大. So that would be me saying every single character as if it were an individual character. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you can say, 虽然只差2岁，但他也比我大. Right? That's obviously a much more flowing sentence, but the first step was to get each individual character correct, and then eventually the sentence will flow when you get more practice at that, and then you start shadowing, and you're listening to native audio, and you shadow what they're doing, and then eventually you get to the point where it all just flows much more naturally. But the only way to get there is through taking each step as it comes. And glad to hear what you've had to say there, Mirko, about the Henzi movie method. It really is. It's amazing that this ability exists in all of our brains, and you don't even have to be particularly smart to be able to do this type of stuff. And then you can remember all this really important information. It's awesome. Glen Creek on casting call for G. My name starts with G. Is it a good idea to use myself as an actor? I would say no. And the reason why is because if you don't use yourself as an actor, and an actor, again, is the person representation of opinion initial in the memory palace. And so if you don't use yourself as an actor, then you can be involved in every single scene if you want, if it's necessary. You don't necessarily have to do that. Obviously, our experience of ourselves is that we don't see ourselves unless we're looking at the mirror. So imagining the scene from your perspective doesn't necessarily include you, but you could if you wanted to, and it wouldn't be confusing to you. But if you make yourself an actor, then when you see yourself in a scene, then theoretically that should represent the letter G in your case, right? But if you don't use yourself as an actor, it won't confuse you. You'll just be like, okay, I'm in the scene, but that's fine. I can be in any scene. I'm the most dynamic actor there is, right? So you can think of it like that. So thanks to Glen for the question. I would recommend not using yourself as an actor. Kent Broeckelman on cha in context. I'm not sure I understand this translation for a sentence, especially if it relates to the previous sentence asking the difference in age between someone and their 哥哥. So the sentence is 虽然只差2岁，但他也比我大. And so 虽然只差2岁 means although we're only different, there's only a 2-year difference in age, he's still older than me, is the translation. He's asking, Kent is asking here, especially if it relates to the previous sentence asking the difference in age between someone and their 哥哥. It seems quite obvious that he is older. Should this mean bigger in size? Interestingly enough, no. In Chinese, if you want to make a comparison, so 他比我, and you're making a comparison of age, then older or younger is 大 or 小, right? So that which is big and little as by themselves, but in Chinese they conceptualize age like that, like a big brother, little brother, right? It's not like it's completely out of the our understanding. We say he's my little brother. Really, we just mean he's younger, right? So 他比我大, 他比我大 means he is older than me. 我比他小, I am younger than him. 我比他小, I am younger than him, right? And that is the way that you express that. So if you want to indicate that your body is bigger than his body, then you have to specify the body. 他的身体比我大, right? So that would mean he has a bigger body than mine, right? And because you specified 身体, then it's clear. But if you just say 他比我大, then the assumption is that you're talking about older or younger. Now, you make a good point that if you've mentioned 哥哥 earlier in the sentence, that there's a, obviousness to it, but, who knows? People say things that are obvious all the time. So, and also it doesn't necessarily have the context of having said 哥哥, right? Or 弟弟, right? Which would mean older brother and younger brother respectively. So maybe you have that context, but maybe you don't. Kairi Woods on 好看 in context. Slowly learning to sit on sentences for a while before panicking that I don't understand the grammar. Didn't understand at first how 那个穿着白衣服的女人 meant woman in the white dress, but on about the 6th flashcard rotation, it just suddenly made sense. Whilst I read it out loud like a 4-year-old, LOL. Right, so I love this comment because Kairi is recognizing a very important truth about your Chinese learning process, which is that you don't have to understand fully the first time as long as you understand partially. Okay, so you look at 那个穿着白衣服的女人. There's a lot that you can understand in this. 那个, that just means that. All right, so okay, cool. 女人, woman. Okay, we know that 衣服 is in here, and maybe even 白衣服. So we have white clothes. Okay, 穿 and 穿着. So 穿 means to wear, 着 means currently happening, so what you're wearing. 我穿着白色的衣服. I'm wearing a white clothing, right? But I can see how maybe the sentence didn't make perfect sense at first, because really what we have is 那个女人, and then there's a bunch of modifiers to 女人. We have 那个穿白衣服的女人. So it's not just a woman, it's the woman who is currently wearing white clothes. And so like all the things that come before 女人 are essentially modifiers to 女人. And so she eventually figured this out, though. Kairi figured this out without having to get a specified explanation, because she's starting to get a feel for the fact that you can put lots of modifiers in front of subjects and objects, And as a result of that, she'll slowly start to see the pattern emerging more and more. And then eventually she's got the meta pattern. At that point, it makes so many sentences unlock their potential. And I often think that there's something about the acquisition process that sometimes feels like, you're creating a connection here and you're creating a connection over here in your brain. Like, there's another one over here and there's another one over here and there's another one over here. And then when you make the 10th connection or something, it's like your brain suddenly realizes, oh, this is a pattern. It's like a key unlocks, and suddenly those 10 connections all link together and become strong, right? And they become one sort of like neural network there of some kind of pattern that they see. And, obviously I'm just sort of speculating a little bit about what might be happening in your brain on the neurological level, but I'm saying that process is unconscious. You can't really decide I'm going to look at this in, a very specified way, because the iterations of it are so many. The iterations of grammar constructions are so many that they're practically infinite. They might be infinite. And so as a result, you can drive yourself crazy trying to consciously add in each individual grammar element, as opposed to just letting it wash over you and constantly getting these unconscious new connections. And then suddenly on the 6th time you see the flashcard, it just clicks into place. And if you have that confidence that you don't need to intellectually understand every single element of a particular grammar point, then you can relax and just let yourself get new content and trust that your brain will put it together. And not only will it put it will put it together without creating the negative side effect of thinking too much about grammar. You'll speak in the second language in a similar fashion you speak your native language, which is just to sort of let things come up as they come up. And, maybe you'll make some mistakes, maybe you'll stutter at certain points, but don't we all do that in our native languages? I've done that in this podcast several times. So that is something where you can trust your unconscious mind. When you trust your unconscious mind, it helps you relax. Being relaxed helps you acquire language. It's the best state of mind to be in when acquiring language. So great comment from Kairi there. Sam Crawford on the first lesson of the Phase 1 course. Welcome, 3 things to do right away. It says, is it okay to use Skritter instead of Anki? I've been using Skritter for a while, so I'm very familiar with it. Does Skritter have any limitations with regards to learning via the Henze movie method? So Skritter's great. I like Skritter, and I think that they have a great product. But the problem is that Anki cards are customizable, which is a requirement for the Mandarin Blueprint method, and they're customizable in a way that Skritter is not. You could just choose to pick the character in Skritter that we're learning, but you wouldn't be able to have our keyword with it, and you wouldn't be able to add any pictures to it, which is a thing we recommend doing all the time, and you wouldn't be able to add, we have all the vocabulary and the living links for the vocabulary, so there's lots of stuff that we do that you can't do with Skritter, so you would have to do a lot of legwork. And then Anki, we've been using Anki because it's the only software that's been customizable enough to be able to work with the Mandarin Blueprint method, but luckily we're building this new flashcard software now that's still got kinks to work out, but it's going to be as customizable for our course as Anki was and easier to use. So, I would not recommend using Skritter for the Mandarin Blueprint method just because you'll end up having to do a lot of extra work. We had a lot of vocab living links come in this week, but we're just going to keep it to 3 because these are our 3 favorites. First, we have Gregory Savage on Vocab Unlocked from 觉得. This is where attention to top-down helps, as with many other characters. I feel, no pun intended, because 觉得 means feel, like I already know many of them. There is a method to the madness. Yeah, so Gregory's pointing out that a word like 觉得, we would have introduced top-down probably like 15 or 20 times before we actually get to the word, because it's such a common word. And since it's so common and people say, I think or I feel this all the time, you can probably learn that word without building up to it from the Mandarin Blueprint method. But what's lucky for you is that when you learn the character 觉, and then we say, oh, there's a word unlocked here, 觉得. Then you get to say, I obviously have seen this several times, but now I really get it. And there's kind of like this awesome moment of connection. So that's great to see that there from Gregory. Next, we have Keith Evans on Vocab Unlocked from Joe, which is Joe Moore. And he puts the song, Everybody's Working for the Weekend. I've literally just made it to the weekend, and anyone reading this is on to character 200, right? So yeah, he's working on the weekend on his Mandarin. So that's excellent stuff. Good connection there. I love song connections. They are always really quick, and you can, at least for me, my audio memory is very good because I play music all the time. So when I hear a song, it's very easy for me to connect it to a new word. Tina Clark on Vocab Unlocked from hao, and she's referring specifically to hai hao. So she says hai hao reminds me of the 7 dwarves singing hi ho, hi ho, hi hao, hi hao to tie it all together. Fortunately, hi hao, the dwarves passed the exam, right? So nice. I love that. Great connection there, and I love the sound mnemonic stuff there. That's it for this week's Mandarin Blueprint podcast. Head over to mandarinblueprint.com to learn more about the course, and as always, thank you for your comments and questions. We'll see you next week.